All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating, the neuroscience of a flexible mind. We're going to get into what's actually happening in your brain when you feel stuck in a rut, and more importantly, we'll look at the science behind how you can break free.
You've totally been there, right? You're staring down a problem and your brain just keeps coughing up the same old answer, even when you know it's not working. It feels like you're just spinning your wheels in some kind of mental mud. Well, it turns out that feeling actually has a name.
It's called the Einsteining effect, and it's basically a cognitive trap where your own expertise can become a blind spot. Your brain, trying to be efficient, just defaults to a familiar path. And in doing so, it can blind you to a much better, maybe even simpler solution that's staring you right in the face.
So the big question is, how do we escape this trap? Well, the answer lies in building up our mental flexibility. This is our ability to shift our perspective, to adapt to new information, and to change course when we need to. It's really the ultimate antidote to that kind of rigid, automatic thinking. So let's look at the two paths here. On one side, you've got rigid thinking. You can think of it like a closed box that fights against new ideas and sees any kind of critical feedback as a personal attack. But on the other side, you have flexible thinking, which, it breaks down those walls. It welcomes new info and sees challenges as opportunities. One leads to stagnation, the other to real growth. And this whole idea of rigid versus flexible thinking brings us right to one of the most powerful concepts in modern psychology, mindsets. These are the deep-down beliefs we have about our own intelligence and abilities. And believe it or not, they can literally change how your brain is wired. Researcher Carol Dweck really gave us the perfect framework for this, with two core mindsets. A fixed mindset is the belief that your intelligence is what it is. You're either smart or you're not. End of story. But a growth mindset sees intelligence as something you can actually build and develop. It's that simple but profound shift from saying, I can't do this, to I can't do this yet. And these internal beliefs, they have massive real-world consequences. Someone with a fixed mindset sees a challenge and avoids it because any setback feels like proof that they just aren't good enough. But as you can see here, a growth mindset actually embraces the challenge. Every stumble isn't a failure. It's just part of the process, an opportunity to learn something and get a little bit stronger. So, how does a growth mindset actually physically change your brain? Let's zoom in on the neuroscience here, because having a flexible mind isn't just a nice metaphor, it's a real physical state inside your skull. And what's going on might not be what you think. Okay, here's a really fascinating, kind of counterintuitive finding from a study in network neuroscience. Researchers discovered that when your entire brain is too synchronized, when there's too much harmony everywhere, it's actually linked to lower mental flexibility. Just let that sink in for a second. To make sense of this, let's use an orchestra as an analogy. You definitely want the violin section to be in sync with itself, right? And you want the percussion section playing together. That's within network synchrony, and that's good. But what you don't want is the entire orchestra, every single instrument playing the exact same note at the exact same time. That's global synchrony, and it's just noise. A flexible brain needs different sections working together in harmony, not one monotonous hum across the board. And this chart really just shows the data. There's a clear negative correlation here. As that global synchrony, that whole brain humming, goes up, cognitive flexibility goes down. In other words, the more your entire brain gets locked into a single pattern, the more rigid and stuck your thinking becomes. True mental agility requires a much more dynamic and diverse brain state. Now let's add another key piece to this puzzle, the neuroscience of mistakes. Because it turns out, your mindset doesn't just change your attitude about making an error, it changes how your brain physically processes it at a neural level. Seriously, think about it. That split second when you realize you've hit the wrong button or said the wrong thing or made a miscalculation. What is physically happening inside your brain in that very moment? Well, researchers using EEGs have found a really clear difference, and it all comes down to your mindset. So here's the crucial finding. When someone with a growth mindset makes a mistake, their brain generates a much stronger electrical signal called the P wave. You can basically think of this as the brain's uh-oh, pay attention signal. It's this big spike in activity that says, hey, something important just happened. This is a learning opportunity. Their brain is literally wired to pay closer attention to its own mistakes so it can learn from them. Okay, so how do we take all this incredible science and actually put it into practice? Well, it really comes down to a simple 3-step process. First, Just get good at recognizing and naming your own rigid thinking patterns. Second, understand the science we just talked about. Know that your brain can physically change. And third, you have to actively reframe your mistakes. Stop seeing them as a verdict on who you are and start seeing them simply as data that's helping you get better. If there is one single thing to take away from all of this, it's this right here. Your mindset acts like a filter. It literally directs what your brain pays attention to, and a growth mindset tells your brain to focus on challenges, on effort, and especially on mistakes, which in turn wires you for constant learning and adaptation. So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. Based on everything we've just explored, what is one fixed belief or one rigid thought pattern in your own life that you could start to challenge? Maybe even today. The answer to that could be your first real step toward building a more flexible, adaptable mind.